Evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are when you see this video. Thank you so much for joining me, Dorothea, on Through an Orthodox Christian Lens. I have a very important video regarding the Azerbaijan and Armenian peace deal, okay, that Trump brokered, or whatever you want to call it. There's so much that ties into how this becomes World War III, how it has a lot to do with Iran, Russia, Turkey, Georgia, and all that. So I'm going to get into this by starting with this article about this peace deal. Trump gains control of Zangezur corridor after brokering Azerbaijan-Armenia peace deal. Washington says the strategic land corridor on Iran's border will be called the Trump route for international peace and prosperity. If I've ever heard anything such BS there, I mean, to me, it seems to be really what they're saying. This is a facade. And I'll explain why I think this after we get to a certain point here. The leaders of these two countries signed a historic peace agreement during a meeting with U.S. President Trump at the White House on August 8th. It's a long time, 35 years they fought, and now they're friends, and they're going to be friends for a long time. Don't think so, but anyway, he said this while he was... He said this at the signing ceremony alongside these two presidents, President, Prime Minister. The deal will broaden economic cooperation and establish diplomatic relations between the two countries while establishing the strategic Zangezur, I can't even say that, corridor. Located on Armenian territory bordering Iran, the corridor will link Azerbaijan with its enclave, the Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic, and give Baku a direct link to Turkey. Armenia plans to award U.S. companies exclusive special development rights for an extended period on the transit corridor, according to officials speaking with Reuters this week. So the Zangezur corridor is viewed as the crucial missing link in a trade route connecting Asia and Europe, known as the Middle Corridor, formerly known as the Trans-Caspian International Transport Route. The conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan erupted in the late 1980s following the breakup of the Soviet Union. Nagorno-Karabakh, an autonomous region populated mainly by ethnic Armenian Christians, broke away from Azerbaijan with support from Armenia. Azerbaijan took back complete control of the region in 2023, forcing virtually all of the territory's 100,000 ethnic Armenians to flee to Armenia. Trump added that Washington also signed separate deals with Yerevan and Baku to expand cooperation on energy trade and technology, including artificial intelligence. The U.S. deal with Azerbaijan also opens the door to defense cooperation between Baku and Washington for the first time. Iran called the agreement an important step toward lasting regional peace, but warned against any foreign intervention near its borders. Yeah, well, both Iran and Russia are saying the same thing. Oh, isn't that nice? They're going to have peace. But I'm sure they know that this is not going to happen. Okay. I'll explain all my thoughts on this once I get done with all of these particular articles that I want to share. Iran and Russia stand to lose from U.S. deal with Azerbaijan and Armenia. Trump brokered peace treaty predicted to suffocate geopolitical influence of Washington's rivals in the region. Iran expressed concern about foreign interference on Saturday, fearing it had been carved out of a declaration brokered by Donald Trump between Azerbaijan and Armenia. The two countries have come closer to ending 35 years of enmity by signing a peace treaty in Washington and agreeing to a U.S. private consortium taking control of a strategic corridor on Iran's border. The corridor passing through southern Armenia will link Azerbaijan with its exclave Nakhchivan, a long-standing demand of Baku. The U.S. will operate the corridor under Armenian sovereignty on a 99-year land lease, changing the balance of power in the region. Some Iranian commentators claimed the deal amounts to Iran's geopolitical suffocation in the region. Control of the corridor that runs along the border between Armenia and northern Iran has been the single biggest block to a peace deal between the two countries. The deal is also a further blow to Russia's diminished influence in the region, as Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan guides his Christian majority country towards the West and eventually the EU. Russia, which still has a military base in Armenia, seems unable to resist the Trump initiative, partly due to its preoccupation with Ukraine. In the statement on Saturday, the Iranian foreign minister said, establishing communication networks will serve the security and economic development of the nations of the region when it is done within the framework of mutual interests, respecting the national sovereignty and territorial integrity of the countries of the region, and without foreign interference. So, Abbas Masavi, former Iranian ambassador to Baku and a deputy presidential spokesperson, described Trump's direct involvement in the issue of relations between Azerbaijan and Armenia as interesting, offensive, and dangerous. But there is little Iran can do to block a deal that the U.S., Armenia, and Azerbaijan see as in their mutual interest. Okay. I'm not going to get into all that rest here, but I wanted to read that. And then, of course, from the Russian point of view, they're saying, oh, yeah, this seems okay, but they know what's going on, okay, I'm sure. Now, this is from Pravda. It says, the purpose of these processes is to weaken Russia and Iran in the region, says Hak Khalatyan, head of the Yerevan-based Analytical Center for Strategic Studies and Initiatives. Events, he told Sputnik Live, what is behind the Baku-Yerevan agreement in the United States. Events may lead to the withdrawal of the Russian base from Armenia. Baku and Ankara will insist on this. At the same time, the appearance of a NATO base in Azerbaijan, for example, a Turkish one, is not excluded. Azerbaijan will continue to demand concessions from Armenia on territories, restrictions on the Armenian armed forces, and so on. Azerbaijan's goal is to completely neutralize the Armenian factor in the region. Only then will Baku agree to sign a peace treaty. Okay. Now I'm going to give you a video. I actually believe I did a video with Alex Craner and through Dialogue Works a while back on one of my other ones, but I couldn't find it. So I brought it back up. I'm going to play the important part that Alex brings up here that is, again, coming into the spotlight of what's going on now with this deal and everything. So what he said a month ago is pertinent. So I'm going to play that for you.
Which are somehow negotiating with the United States, but those people who were some advocating to a better relationship with the United States are getting weaker as time goes by in those countries.
I think it will strengthen the relationship between Iran and Russia. I think that it was clear that Iran needs Russia and Russia needs Iran, and now it became even clearer, because I know that in Iran there's there's a part of the political class that is still very distrustful of the Russians. And then, maybe there's a little bit of that mutual feeling on the other side as well. But it's very obvious why Russia needs Iran. And now it's much more clear why Iran also needs Russia. Because, we're talking about a complete overhaul of the security architecture on the whole Eurasian continent. And Iran is practically the centerpiece of the security architecture of the West Asia or the Middle East. And we see how important that is now, especially that, what was it, in March, in less than 3 months ago, Azerbaijan got a new British military attaché, who took office in under British embassy in Baku. And then all of a sudden, hey, look, you have Azerbaijan beginning to antagonize Russia, and they begin to antagonize Iran all at the same time. So you see the British geopolitics is continuing in operation. And if you don't set up and cement a new security architecture, that's only a guarantee that it's going to be war, more and more and more war. They're always going to find a pretext, So, you can find some reason to go and antagonize the Russians and start to destabilize, derail the friendly relations between Russia and the Azerbaijan, which they tried to cultivate in spite of all the difficulties. Well, if you blow that relationship up, then immediately you're poisoning the relations between Russia and Turkey, because Turkey and Azerbaijan have a common interest there, and ideally they would like to connect territorial, on that how do you call that that land bridge between Azerbaijan and Turkey, not Zangezur corridor. So that could be the territorial connection between Turkey and Azerbaijan. So that's already like a potential crisis flashpoint, and then that's going to pull Turkey back into the globalist camp, where they already are because of Syria, because the Turks are completely in bed with the British intelligence in Syria. So it's a big, complicated mess. And then obviously the globalist forces, and I don't think it's CIA as much as it is MI6 and Mossad, who are have very close cooperation with the Azerbaijanis, with their deep state, and
this is the corridor that you were talking about.
Yes, and so that's it's Azerbaijan is already on bad terms with Armenia, and they've been in and out of wars for the last 30 years, and we still don't have now maybe we do have partly a solution to that conflict, because the Armenians merely yielded to Azerbaijan's territorial ambitions, but there's still this Zangezur corridor that Baku would very much like to control. And so that might come up sometimes in the near future, particularly if you have, because, okay, this has been the one of the major strategies of the MI6 to try to dominate West Asia has been working with the Turks, with the Turkish deep state, and of course with the Azerbaijanis, because they're also Turkic people, to what the British geopolitics has done for the past 200 years. They always promise concessions to regional powers. So if they want Turks to help them take over Syria, they'll take them like, oh, we'll help you against the Kurds, or we'll help you establish your kind of dominant position among the Turkic people. and there's this project of Great Turania, which goes from Turkey all the way almost to China, to Xinjiang province, and it's all these Turkic people, all the stans, the Turkmenistans, the Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Azerbaijan, and then but for the Zangezur corridor connection to Turkey. So this could be the whole ginormous Great Turania, which maybe people like Aliyev or Erdogan would like to have in their legacy that they united the Turkic people in the world and created this great political economic entity, but then that completely derails the BRICS architecture. And not to mention that northern part of Iran is southern Azerbaijan, again populated by majority Turkic people, so you can always use separatist movements to destabilize Iran in this way, and obviously they're moving in that direction. So I think that if you're Russia and China, this is a sign that you really need to support Iran, because Iran is the antithesis of these Western schemes to destabilize the region. And, I think that Russia has been largely successful in this sense because the British... Okay, so the current head of MI6, Sir Richard Moore, used to be the British ambassador to Turkey. And so this Great Turania was his assignment. And he has become close friends with Erdogan, right? And he's been selling Erdogan on this Greater Turania project. And Erdogan has been very receptive. And he tried to co-opt Turkey into their war on Russia and Ukraine. They wanted to bring Turkey as a Western ally in the proxy war against Russia and Ukraine. They wanted Turkey to support the West in Ukraine. And the Turks did a little bit, but not, and that was thanks to Russian diplomacy, because the Russians made sure, even though, Turkey is not really an ally of Russia, but at least they're not an enemy. So the Russians brought Turkey out of the Western alliance, and the Turks chose not to join the alliance against Russia. So they're kind of in a limbo, half-half. But they're not, the Brits are not going to stop trying. They brought Turkey into the Project Syria. So, the Turks cultivated HTS together, and together with the Brits, they managed all these jihadi militaries and militias to overthrow Bashar al-Assad regime. And now,
using Turkic people, by the way.
Sorry?
Using the Turkic people, these.
Yes, exactly. But the Russians know that this is coming from them in the future. If they let this stand, because Russians are very vulnerable to these jihadi terrorist groups that the West cultivates in Dagestan, in Chechnya, in Kazakhstan and elsewhere. I mean, okay, Kazakhstan is not in Russia, but I mean, it's all along the soft underbelly of Russia, where they are at risk of being infiltrated by these terrorist groups. So if they consolidate their power in the Middle East, in Syria, and start gaining ground, well, then they're like as they incubated them in Idlib to attack Syria, they can now incubate them better in Syria to eventually attack Iran and to attack ultimately Russia as well, and then China as well through Xinjiang. So I think there's no question that the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians are aware of all this, and that they need to counter it.
Okay. Very informative, very important, and very informative of Alex Craner here, explaining all of this to us, which really, really aligns very well with Elder Joseph's of Vadapuri, his World War III prophecies in those quote-unquote phases that I told you about, which we will go over here in a minute. There's one other article I need to show you. A quick article. Georgia PM blames 2008 war with Russia on previous regime. The catastrophic gamble of the previous leadership inflicted immense damage on the country, says this person, who's the current Prime Minister of Georgia. So the former Georgian president, Mikhail something or other, and his government are responsible for the 2008 war with Russia, says the Georgia Prime Minister something or other. The conflict waged on behalf of the deep state inflicted immense damage on the country and its interests, according to this PM. It says he delivered the remarks on Friday as Georgia marked the 17th anniversary of the beginning of the hostilities known as the 5-Day War. The Prime Minister squarely blamed this former Prime Minister for the conflict, stating that an attack on the breakaway Republic of South Ossetia was orchestrated on his direct orders. Today, we need to remember all the documents signed by the then government, which state that this person's regime started the war. There is no escape from these documents. They are irrefutable proof that the then government unleashed the war and dealt a severe blow to the national interests of our country, he says. He went on to suggest the conflict was instigated by foreign forces. The hostilities began early on August 8, 2008, when the Georgian military subjected the capital city of the breakaway Republic of South Ossetia, Tiskinval, to artillery bombardment and moved in to attack local militias and Russian peacekeepers stationed there. South Ossetia and Republic of Abkhazia split from Georgia following a civil war in the early 1990s, shortly after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The attack prompted a swift armed response from Russia, with the active phase of hostilities lasting for only 5 days. The Russian military expelled Tbilisi's forces from South Ossetia, which retreated in disarray, while Moscow's troops advanced into Georgian territory through South Ossetia and this place before a ceasefire was agreed. Shortly afterward, Russia recognized the independence of the two republics, maintaining close ties with them ever since. So, the PM ruled out signing any agreements on the two republics on the no use of force, emphasizing Tbilisi aims to achieve its goals through diplomacy. The only way to restore territorial integrity is a peaceful path, and there can be no talk of any such documents. So he doesn't want to sign any agreements with the two republics on the non-use of force, saying, no, I'm going to use diplomacy. So, no talk of any such documents. It's all going to be diplomatic. Well, let's go over what Elder Joseph had said about this issue that seems to really be highlighted here in this particular moment after all of this that I just gave you. So let's go back to that. Let's go back to the first phase, as they called it. Number 1. Okay, so the first war is between Russia and Georgia. It happened in 2008. Russia will be challenged again by Georgia. It's going to be challenged again. So do you think that this prime minister is really going to be keeping the peace? Is he really going to be doing diplomacy? He didn't sign those papers, so his name's not signed on there to say, we won't use force. What does that say? It seems to line up here, doesn't it? And so, Russia will be challenged again by Georgia, and this time Russia will destroy it completely. Last time in 2008, for those 5 days, it was bad. They lost somewhere around 800 850 people, and about 1,000 or about 10,000 or something like that were displaced. They fled. But now they're saying that Russia is going to destroy it completely. This is really sad to see all these Orthodox countries, and like I said, this is all part of this plan. Let me just make this big thing, okay? Because my son has actually been looking into this, which is kind of interesting. He's like, hey Mom, I'm finding out all this information about Azerbaijan and all this and Russia and what they're doing. And I was like, yeah, that's what I've been following this whole time, And so what I'm saying is this is this master, and I don't want to call it master, but it is a huge plan by the West. That would be the U.S., UK, probably Israel, the Mossad, all the intelligence, the three intelligent groups as usual. But those countries, the UK, the US, maybe Israel. Then you have the NATO, some of the NATO members, and they're using, as Anima said, the Turkish people to get what they want, and they are constantly using people. And so they want to, as we all know, their plan this whole time has been to weaken Russia, and through exhausting their weapons and their manpower over the years. They used Ukraine. They first used Georgia. They used Ukraine. And then they're going to use Azerbaijan, the Armenia thing, and at the same time they're weakening Iran. Iran, Russia, and China are connected now. India has become more connected to China because of the tariff junk that Trump's been doing. So what this is telling you is that it's weakening all of these major powers so they can not only get the resources and all that, but also to destroy BRICS, like Alex Grainer was talking about. So many goals in this plan of the West. Okay. NATO and all that. So when we know that, let's go back to the thing here. So after that, it says, Georgia is the Americans' embankment to delay the Russians so that America and Israel can attack Iran undisturbed. Now, I would say that he's talking about the next provocation from Georgia. That's not talking about that time in 2008. He's talking about that time when Russia is challenged again by Georgia, and that it'll be destroyed completely. But Georgia is the Americans' embankment to delay the Russians so that America and Israel can attack Iran undisturbed. Meaning, when this happens again with Georgia, the way I'm understanding this is that that's when they're going to once again attack Iran. Because we know that second attack is coming. The second conflict war with Iran is coming. Now, however, Putin declared that by attacking Iran, he is seizing Georgia, which is strategically a critical point. Yes, that's an important area there as far as buffer zones and having allies on his side, on Russia's side. Now, unfortunately, the civilian casualties in Georgia will be terrible. Lord have mercy. As long as the Russians are fighting there, the Ukrainians will be incited by the Americans and will create strong provocations against them. Now, of course, we know that's going on. And that they've been using both of Georgia and Ukrainians to, as we said, weaken Russia, distract Russia so they can do other things against Russia, against Iran, ultimately China. Okay, So this whole master plan, quote unquote, seems to be huge. So, above that, they talked about the 2008 global financial crisis that happened, the big recession. So now they're saying that the Third World War will take place in 7 successive phases, conflicts, and will gradually culminate. Each individual war will be fiercer than the previous one and will involve more and more nations, while there will be intervals of peace. The people whose countries will be at war will run and plead with God, but they will not be heard. The people who will live in non-warring countries will not be exemplified and enlightened by the calamities of their neighbors, but will ask for war and destruction to avenge their enemies. The war will eventually spread to a global level. Ruins, destruction, hunger, misery, plunder, and disease will prevail everywhere. So here we are, on this cusp with the things with Azerbaijan and Armenia. So let's go to the next portion so we can read about that.
Birds will rise up.
Okay. So let's go to, where was I? Not that, I don't think that's it. Okay, I think that's the next. Okay, so it says, Turkey will then allow Americans, and I assume this is still part of that first phase, Turkey will then allow American ships and aircraft to pass through the Straits of the Hellespont and from her national airspace to strike the Russians. Now, why do you think that's happening? Why is it? Now that we see that they're trying to work with Turkey and getting Turkey to go against Russia, as Alex was saying, and you're going to have a big Turkmenia, Turkmenia, all the stands and everything. You can have a huge empire, the Turkish Empire again, like the Ottoman one. Now, of course, there's the conflict with Israel because Israel wants Syria as well. And like we said, Metropolitan Neophytus talked about that. So here we have this. So apparently Turkey, so whatever happens with, hold on. I feel like I'm missing something here, but maybe I'm not. Okay, so let me finish here. It's going to open that for the airspace. Now, the countdown for the Turks will begin. The Russians will very soon occupy Ukraine. The Russians will very soon occupy Ukraine and will be enthusiastically welcomed in the cities. We've talked about that before. Because of the conscription issue, and I saw a Gallup poll the other day. The Ukrainians, more than half of them are ready for peace. They're tired of the war. They don't want to be conscripted. So, and then they were happy that Russia was bombing their recruitment sites in Ukraine. So that is seeming to go that direction as well. Over Ukraine and the Black Sea, the Americans and Russians will fight for the first time air battles, and the Russians will prevail overwhelmingly. In Turkey, a dictatorship will have been imposed. Now, this is when they're talking about Erdogan falling and the more Western-leaning government will take over. The officials, the government officials that will take over after Erdogan. The Kurds will rise up, creating a front against the Turks. Now, let's not forget that Israel, there was a bit on Israel using the Kurds, creating that front against the Turks, because Israel wants Syria. So I think they instigate the Turks with the Kurds. This is the way I'm reading this. There will be a global economic upheaval, a stoppage of payment, the collapse of one economy after another. That's going into the whole economic issues with America and Greece, but it'll be global, as we know. So let's go to that next part that I usually have looked at several times. So number 2, an attack by America and Israel against Iran is imminent. So they brought that up a while ago, that they were going to distract Russia with the issue with Georgia, the issue with Ukraine, okay, and then now the issue with Azerbaijan and Armenia. So it sounds to me that they're saying it's imminent means, okay, well, this is going to be happening soon. And I assume that they're talking about, we already know there was a short 12-day war between Israel, the United States, and then against Iran. This may be the second attack against Iran, but it's hard to say. I'm just going by what I'm getting out of this. You all might have a different idea of what this all means. So we're going to say, okay, so we're going to read the rest here. But war will also break out in our neighborhood. He's talking about Greece. Albanians, Croats, Bosnian Muslims, Americans, and a few NATO members against the Orthodox of Russia and Serbia. Yes, Serbia is being antagonized, says Alex Craner in another video already, and that they're trying to work on having the surrounding countries have a pact of using them as a pact of defense or offense against Serbia. I think it was Croatia, Bosnia, and I forget what the other one was. Albania, perhaps. In any case, then they go into the whole thing about the junta that will rule Turkey will attack Greece, but the Russians will move quickly southwards, rushing to occupy Turkey as quickly as possible before NATO can reinforce it. Turkey will be hit hard and destroyed completely. Now, the Russians will have previously, let's remember this part again, that's so important, previously invaded Georgia, Ukraine, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, pushing back the American troops. And if they, and we're saying that Turkey, there was that one article in Pravda saying that Turkey and Azerbaijan, I think, I forget, they're going to pressure Russia to close its base over there. And they don't have any bases, but they have one there. So all of this seems to be coming together. So we're just going to center on that right now, because this is what is going on. We know eventually this other stuff is going to happen. But I really wanted to pinpoint on that, because this just seems to be the focus right now with this news. It's important. It really lines up with what's going on in the prophecies. So I wanted to make sure that we got that out there and talked about it. And if you all would like to share your thoughts on that, that would be great. How you read the prophecies, what you think the elder meant. That's what I got out of it, my understanding. But thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for following my channel and for your support. I hope you're having a blessed day, evening, morning. Until next time.